Guys, welcome back to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. Listen, some of my favorite things I get to do on this show is recommend new things to you, things that I actually like. And I'm going to recommend a podcast to you today that I have fallen in love with immediately. It is a subject that is very close to my heart. And of course, it's pop culture. But the podcast itself is called In Retrospect with Susie Banikarim and Jessica Bennett. And Susie is with us here today. But let me just read this before we get introduced to Susie. This is the log line for the show. Is there a cultural moment from your past that looks different in retrospect? Maybe it's a scandalous tabloid story seared in your teenage brain or a political punchline that just feels wrong now. It might be a very specific red swimsuit that inspired a decade of plastic surgery, see Baywatch, or the inescapable smell of an entire generation of prepubescent boys, Axe body spray. Each week in retrospect, Emmy-winning journalist Susie Banikarim and New York Times editor Jessica Bennett revisit a pop culture moment from the 80s and 90s that shaped them to try to understand what it taught us about the world and a woman's place in it. And I've got to tell you, I've listened to all the episodes and it has been such a refreshing podcast that brings me back. There's just a handful of episodes out right now, but there is, I was just listening to last night, the Oprah weight loss in the red wagon of her pulling her 65 pounds of fat. Like that moment as a child is seared into my memory. So please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Susie Banikarim. Susie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Well, we'll make sure that excitement goes away real quick.
I don't
Listen, Susie and Jessica, there's a great episode. It's a real quick episode explaining how they know each other, which is great. Yeah. I always think more podcasts should do that because I'm always curious about your relationship. But as a little cheat sheet, how did you and Jessica, your co-host, meet?
So Jessica and I met many years ago when we were both at Newsweek Daily Beast, right when, I don't know if people remember this era in media, but there was a time when Newsweek magazine and Daily Beast, which was like a digital upstart at that time, were merged, and it was a very strange relationship that eventually did end up being a divorce. And I joined as the head of video, and she was a writer for Newsweek magazine. And we met at an event. My first week, there was like a big newsroom event, and it was pretty chaotic. And we found each other across a crowded room. We like to call it our meet cute. And we've been friends ever since. So, you know, I think we've been through lots of different phases of our own career and lots of phases of media together. So part of, the way we came up with this idea for the podcast was that we would have these conversations ourselves. Like late at night, we're both not great sleepers. Late at night, we would call each other when everyone else was sleeping, and we would talk about, this or that sort of pop culture thing from our memories or things that were happening. And we thought, honestly, this is interesting and maybe there's something here. And that's how we came up with this idea.
I think it's just such a great idea because there's such a wealth of things to pull from. There's so many moments. And I was sitting here because I was like, oh my God, what are future episodes going to be? I was like, oh, I wonder if they're going to do the Hugh Grant going on Jay Leno once he was busted for the sex worker on Hollywood Boulevard. I was like, I wonder if they're going to cover that. I think when you listen to this show, what's so great is that you then collect your little memories. And I was going back trying to think of these moments as a kid in the 80s and 90s that really I was like, oh, is there going to be like a 90210 Melrose Place episode?
Is there going to be? I want to do 90210. It's not on the list yet, but I do really want to do, especially kind of the way that Shannon Doherty was villainized in such a meaningful way. There was all this online. I mean, I guess it wouldn't have been online then, but there was all this chatter about how much people hated Brenda, and she sort of took the hit for that in her personal life as well. And I think those moments are super interesting. I was a big 90210 fan. I watched the reboot even. Because I apparently never grow up, so I love a teen show. But yeah, that's one of the fun things about this. People do message us all the time. Our friends do, being like, oh, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And we would love for listeners to do that too. So, feel free to send in ideas if you're listening to the show. We would love it. Some other moments we're going to tackle this week, I'm sorry, not this week, but this season are, we're going to talk about Amy Fisher and the sort of that
Joey Buttafuoco and that whole
Joey Buttafuoco, kind of what went on there. We're going to talk about Dawson's Creek. Jess was a really big Dawson's Creek fan. And so we're going to talk about this relationship on the first season between Pacey, who was a teenage boy, and his 30-something-year-old teacher. And that was so wild because I watched Dawson's Creek when it aired, but I hadn't rewatched it. And I rewatched the first season before we recorded, and like so much sexual innuendo that I did not get as a teen. Like I did not realize how crazy it was. And then there's this wild scene where Pacey says to his teacher, to be clear, "I'm the best sex you're never going to have." And I was like, as an adult woman, just such a joke. Like, this 16-year-old boy is not going to be the best sex she's never had. Like, that's crazy. But when you're a teenager, you're like, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, good. That's a great thing to say. Right. Yeah, amazing.
And then also we get to talk about Mary Kay Letourneau. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh my God! Of course, Mary Kay. Are you kidding me? Of course, I remember these things. That's what I'm saying. Like, what's so interesting about pop culture too is that I think starting in the '80s, potentially more the late '80s, is that we started mixing up pop culture with actual, not illegal activities, but like it became global in the sense of, like you said, like the Joey Buttafuoco and the Amy Fisher, like all of these things became pop culture. They were kind of like co-opted by pop culture, and we were like, that's ours too.
Well, I think what's interesting for both of us who are reality fans is that a lot of times what comes up when we're covering these stories is that these are almost like reality shows before reality shows, right? When we didn't have that, we had these news stories that became kind of soap operas of their own, right? Like the Amy Fisher story, which was really a story about a 30-something-year-old man sleeping with a 16-year-old girl, became instead sort of this trope about seductive Lolitas, about girls like seducing men. And, there's lots of complicated things about Amy Fisher. She did shoot a woman, so I'm not totally.
Yeah, she's not perfect, everybody. She's not perfect.
But I think that is this interesting thing is that before we had people who chose to give us access to their lives, there were these celebrities whose lives became sort of myth or story and didn't always really have a relationship with their actual lives. And that's what we're trying to really mine for this.
Susie, you are so right, though, too. And I also loved what you said earlier about the 90210 and Brenda, but it was pre-online. But there was this, as a kid, I bought the I Hate Brenda book. I still have the I Hate Brenda.
That's amazing that you still have it.
There was a novelization that I spent my allowance money on, the I Hate Brenda book. And it has her face on it with a red, like the X through it. And I was like, that's wild, because there wasn't online forums back there for us to all go and take out our hate. So there was actually books about hating this person, this character.
Magazines, and it just is interesting, right? That even before we had this sort of like online arena where these ideas come together, that somehow there were these big ideas that took shape and these like narratives that took shape about celebrities. And in large part, media contributed to that. So it's also sort of just like looking at media critically. We're both journalists, so we know exactly how things can go awry. And we just want to be honest about that. I think it's important to sort of hear from the people who make your news that, it's imperfect. And we know it's imperfect. And part of getting better is, paying attention and looking back.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And that's what I love about pop culture is that this should be studied. You can actually chart a course of where we are today. If you go back and look, you can see how we got here. You can see where we're at. And, it seems so much more insane because it's not even a 24/7 news cycle. It's a second by second news cycle. Yeah. And that includes pop culture. But it wasn't always this way. We see from these like 80s and 90s how things kind of exploded. And I find that, like, I love that this is out there, and I love that you two are doing it because I trust you guys. Like, I've read so much of Jessica's work in the past, and I was like, you guys are heavy hitters. And to talk about something that I dearly love, this is what I always fight for. It's like shows like this that I want to have this as a debate. I want archival footage of it. I want big minds to talk about this stuff because I think it's worthy of study.
Well, I hope that we can live up to the idea of being big minds. I know Jess can, at least. But yeah.
Hey, stop it, Susie. By the way, Susie also, I just want to bone to pick with her. They do that episode where they introduce, and she's like, I'm kind of on the lower sometimes taste because I like reality shows, and I know you don't. I'm like, screw that, Susie. You need to stand up for reality shows. Listen, Jessica likes Dawson's Creek. That's just as bad as reality shows. Be proud. Be proud of loving reality shows.
Yeah, okay, that's true, and that's fair. I actually am really not at all ashamed of loving reality shows. I want to be clear. I worked on a reality show. I was a producer on Wife Swap, so no shame here at all.
The first season of Wife Swap you produced.
Yes, I did. I was
legendary
a producer on the first season of Wife Swap, which was an absolutely wild ride. And we do have an episode where we talk about kind of regrets, and I talk about some of the things that we were asked to do on that show as producers, which looking back are, concerning. But it was a different time, I mean, we didn't really know better in terms of how to treat people. And I think there was very little understanding of mental health. And, people who signed up for reality shows back then didn't really know what they were getting into. So it was really just like a very different environment. But yeah, when I say that I'm the low end of the high low with Jess and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just think it is the case that I really, in my career, have done some, very like classic journalist things. I've interviewed the president. I've like done all the things.
I mean, you've been in newsrooms. Like,
I've been in newsrooms. I've run newsrooms. So yeah, I'm not trying to be self-deprecating, but it is true that I will spend an afternoon watching a Lifetime movie, and Jess would never do that. So
or a Hallmark holiday movies are about to come up.
We're going to do an episode about Hallmark movies. Like, I think Hallmark movies are really interesting and introduced an idea that we hear a lot now, which is this idea of comfort television. Like, now there are whole shows that Netflix markets as comfort television, but Hallmark is kind of the original of that, right? It's so unchallenging. It's warm. It's like, everybody loves each other. The conflicts are easily resolved. It's like you can just have it on in the background and it makes you feel soothed. And that's a real thing, that's meaningful, I think.
I think it totally is meaningful. I just sometimes hate when conglomerates like Netflix know that and then they abuse it. They're like, we're going to push this algorithm directly at you on your couch with a big box of popcorn,
Yeah. Well, the algorithm, unfortunately, does know us, so they know how to game us.
One of your first episodes, or one of the most recent ones, was the Oprah moment with the red wagon. Yeah. And I loved the details, the research that went into this. And I remember as a kid watching this, and you brought this up just a second ago about mental health. Mental health wasn't a thing like it is now. You were talking about wife swap, but also in terms of weight loss and body positivity. And we had this moment that was such a huge moment of Oprah, wheeling this fat in on a red wagon. She really teased it out because she was just such an icon and understood how to tease an audience and, reveal something, make it big. And we all just thought that was completely awesome and normal. And if that happened in 2023, I think it would be a completely different moment, but it was a different time back then, right?
Well, yeah. So I think a couple things about this. Partially, I do think the moment is different, but also look at all the conversations we're having around Ozempic, right? We still love to see a celebrity lose weight. We're still fascinated by it. There is still just this cultural obsession with celebrity bodies, right? And I think women's bodies particularly. And, I think Oprah is an interesting person because Oprah was not the typical person you saw on television. In fact, when she was asked to host the Oprah show, the thing she said to the man who was offering her the job was, you know that I'm Black and I'm fat, right? Which is like such a fascinating thing, right? Here's this woman, she will go on to be the, maybe the most successful woman of our time. And she herself is sort of like, expressing this concern about whether or not she fits some kind of mold. And then she goes on to be an enormous success. She is making $25 million a year. She's been nominated for an Oscar. And yet she still feels that her weight is so defining that she does this episode, this like very famous episode where she's lost 67 pounds and she wheels out this wagon with animal fat to be like, look at all this disgusting fat I've, lost from my body. And it's her highest rated episode. Of her 25 years on the air, it's the highest rated episode, which really gives you a sense of how much we love these transformations. And I think that's partially because, they give us hope. In real life, change is really, really hard. Losing 67 pounds takes forever. And, having something transformative happen to you is not something that feels attainable. And so when we see these big moments, they give us hope for ourselves, but nobody really stepped back and asked the question of like, is that the right thing for Oprah to be doing? Is that the right thing for Oprah's body? Like she literally says in retrospect that, no pun intended, that, looking back, she really regrets it. By the time that week was over, she could no longer fit into the jeans she was wearing on the show. I mean, it just wasn't a sustainable weight loss. She had starved herself for months and months to get into these jeans. And she was modeling something that wasn't attainable. It wasn't just aspirational. It was flat out not possible. And I think that's something that, a lot of us have to grapple with as we become women and ask ourselves like how we're going to feel about ourselves and how much we're going to question our own worth based on our physical appearance. And it's really hard. I think as a woman, I think as a man, it can be really hard sometimes too. You know, we are always looking for the ways in which we're not good enough. And I think, you know, Oprah, who is this woman you think would have all the confidence in the world, her expressing this vulnerability made her a target in a lot of ways, but also, you know, when you look at it, it was brave in other ways. So we're trying not to be scolding in this at all. We're not trying to say like, oh, look what this Oprah did. We're really trying to come from a place of like deep empathy because, you know, I love Oprah. That's the whole thing. These are things we loved, you know?
Oh man, I love Oprah so much. And I don't really share this story. And by the way, like this is, you know, I have such a female listenership, but sometimes I feel like I'm not a guy sometimes. And just that, like, I bought Oprah's book. Like, I yo-yo weight. I mean, I wish I'd yo-yo back down, but I've been, you know, I yo-yo weight a lot. But when I was in end of high school, beginning of college, one of her first weight loss books, I think I forgot what the guy's name, maybe Bob or something. But I got this book at like a Walden Books when those existed on like the $5 thing, and I had put on a lot of weight, and this was the book that helped me get back into shape. But also I was not doing it healthy either. Like I was just basically eat one meal a day and do this. But I trusted Oprah. I trust Oprah. And it's interesting you point out that I forgot completely. They did the same thing on the show with Kirstie Alley. Like Kirstie Alley will come back in a year and wear a bikini. I was like, wait, and then I remember that actually happened. Like they did that.
No, of course. Yeah, those were hugely popular shows for her. Those weight loss reveals were hugely popular. And in fact, I was a producer on Katie Couric's talk show. And for the first episode, we spent months trying to decide what we were going to do. And what we did was a weight loss reveal for Jessica Simpson. You know, because we knew those things rated, right? So she was a spokesperson for Weight Watchers at the time, and she was going to come on in a bathing suit to show us like how much weight she lost with Weight Watchers. And what we didn't know at the time is she was pregnant. So she hadn't lost enough weight to be in a bathing suit because she was pregnant. But we didn't know that. I'm not even sure. I don't even know if Weight Watchers knew that. So she had to come on in a dress. And it was this whole drama about like, how were we going to show her weight loss, but she wasn't going to be in a bikini. And, you know, I think those shows did well. There's a reason they kept doing them. And they speak to something, you know, that I think we all sort of struggle with. And so it makes people who seem like they have perfect lives relatable. And so we love that on some level. We want to feel like those people who have all the things we don't have, you know, suffer in some of the same ways we do, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like they're sharing their Achilles heel with us. Like Oprah has everything, but she's sharing this one part of herself that she doesn't seem to be able to fully get under control. And then she's learning as, you know, we just look up to her and then she's like, you know what, that wasn't the right thing to do. But we didn't know that at the time. We're like, yay, Oprah. And then she's like learning how to do that. But that's so interesting about these celebrities that share things. But also you just reminded me about Jessica Simpson. There's, you know, it's like what we were fat shaming certain women in pop culture.
As a culture to Jessica Simpson, like the mom gene. And I think the other thing that's fascinating when you go back and look at this stuff is that I will look back at that mom jeans picture and be like, she is objectively not fat in this picture. Like, but we were convinced that she was actually fat. Like, we're like, oh yeah, she doesn't look good. It's like, she looked beautiful. So it's so crazy. Like, our own brains were so like awash in this stuff. So we really believed all of these stories that we were told. And so then we felt bad about ourselves. But Jessica Simpson has always been a beautiful girl. She was never overweight in any meaningful way. You know?
It was weird. It's like sometimes we have like this cultural blindness in pop culture where we just like, yep, and then you look back and you're like, God, what an amazing, I mean, she looks amazing. I was thinking about my own ones and I'll try to say this delicately, but it was just thinking of pop culture moments of when J-Lo first really started to like pop in terms of her music and movies all together. I think people forget about this. There was so many articles, late night talk show hosts, everybody joking about her butt. About like, what a big butt, what an amazing big butt. Oh my God, the butt. It was, guys, every night that was the punchline on so many jokes. It was highlighting the butt this, the butt that. And it's so weird now because like, you know, in a post-Kardashian world, you know, you look at J-Lo, it's average. It's like average butt. Like but at the time we were like, everybody joked about this butt, where she even admitted she started getting insecure about her own body that she had always thought was beautiful. And I find that interesting that we all kind of even hopped on that bandwagon.
Well, yeah, because, we were coming out of heroin chic, right? Remember right before J-Lo popped, there was this era of the Kate Moss model, the sort of like, looked like a little boy, sort of was like flat chested, no butt, like really wafy. And so I think when that's the model, then you look at someone like J-Lo, who's just like a healthy, beautiful woman, and you wonder if that's like wrong in some way. And the truth is, none of this is wrong. Like, people should be okay with whatever bodies they've been given. It's just not so easy, right? Like, I've struggled myself. You've said that you've struggled. And actually, Oprah released a special recently, and she interviewed some doctors about Ozempic, right? Because that's become such a hot topic, obviously a big Real Housewives hot topic. And one of the things she talked about is how she has just now at this age finally come to accept that, weight is actually a brain issue. It's not a matter of willpower or self-control the way we've been led to believe. It's actually a real medical condition that has medical interventions that make sense. And they said this thing on the special, this Harvard doctor said this thing that absolutely blew my mind, which is that your weight set point is as genetic as your eye color. Now, that is crazy. That's the opposite of what we've been taught, right? What we've been taught is if we just had more self-control, more willpower, more, strength, we would be able to change this thing about ourselves. But you would never think you could change your eye color, right? You can't. You just can't do it. So it's really just like accepting that some of this stuff is genetic. It's not, a lack of strength to struggle with these issues. And there are, increasingly better medical interventions, and we shouldn't shame people for that either. Like, I find the whole Ozempic shaming also distasteful, because I'm like, let women do what they want with their own bodies. Like, let's stop acting like it should be our decision.
It is funny what we make the hot button issues in terms of pop culture that like gets branched out into society. You also, speaking of looks, in a sense, you also have an episode on Pamela Anderson, Baywatch, the red suit. And, I always forget that Baywatch really globally was like the #1 show out there.
Yeah, I honestly had no idea. Jess was the one who did the research for that episode. So she has, met Pamela Anderson. She's interviewed her. And so she really had spent a lot of time thinking about this red bathing suit and what it came to represent in American culture. And the fact is that, Pamela Anderson and her Baywatch era was a huge boon to plastic surgeons. Women would literally just go in with a picture of Pamela Anderson and say, I want to look like this, and it makes sense. She became kind of this iconic American girl, this California girl that all over the world is what sort of people picture when they think of an American girl. And that's really interesting too, right? Like what we kind of define as what it means to be American, what it means to look American. I think those things, I'm, an immigrant, I'm an Iranian immigrant. And so, I think for me as a girl, that was also really interesting. It took me a while to sort of be like, it's okay. I can be American and also look like me. And, Pam is such an interesting person because she has really embraced aging in a way that I think you might not have expected if you knew her from that era. She just recently did Paris Fashion Week without makeup. She's someone who I think really sort of defies these, blonde bimbo stereotypes that were placed on her. But she became sort of a sort of caricature, right? Like people sort of forgot that there was like a person in the bathing suit. She just became this image to the point where, they would sell like calling cards with her picture on it.
Yeah.
Everything with just her picture on it,
I mean, it's so funny too, because she's Canadian, but she did become this American symbol and that really got, and, like I said, Baywatch was not just popular in America, it was worldwide, the #1 show. And Baywatch is from a geek standpoint, like it was insane because it started off as an NBC show, didn't last more than one season, and then Hasselhoff syndicated this thing and it got huge and made stars out of a couple of people on that. But I find it interesting, and what I love about your show though, and that's why In Retrospect is the perfect title, because you do have the benefit of all of these years in between and to see where they are now. Because Pam Anderson, if you watch that Netflix documentary that was released last year or read her autobiography, I mean, you get or even with Oprah, seeing where they are now, seeing where this moment happened and being able to, like, I keep saying that, chart that course.
Yeah.
That's what I find fascinating is, like, look how we changed, and look at the people that make these decisions. And like you said, Pamela Anderson at Fashion Week, she was celebrated last week for not wearing makeup, for coming out naturally. And I just thought, what an interesting thing, because I remember times in Pam Anderson's career, especially, where she was completely lambasted, made fun of.
Yeah.
Obviously, we saw the sex tape happen, and I think it was Hulu did the series on that a couple of years ago, which was like a comedic series, even though she said it was a horrifying moment in her life.
She actually hated that series, from what I understand. I think she felt like it was, sort of taking her story and making their own decisions about it, right? And already, I think Pam Anderson is someone whose narrative has been co-opted a lot, right? So I think at this stage of her life, she wants to own her own story, and she should. She has a really interesting story to tell. And that's also an interesting thing that's kind of going on that Jess and I talk about a lot. Jess did a lot of this work we're used to now, which is, she did the first big interview with Monica Lewinsky when she came back from the scene, and she's sort of done these articles revisiting these women who were, as she puts it, scorned. And, Pam is sort of an example of that too, right? She was sort of treated like this dumb bimbo, but Pam has a lot of really interesting things to say, and she should get to say that herself. And, we're telling a lot of those stories again. But I think as a culture, we have to be careful not to tell the stories for other people, to let them actually participate in those stories as much as possible, which is why, on the show, we focus more on moments, like cultural moments, rather than just being like, let's just talk about this person and decide how this person felt. Because we don't know, we can't know what Pam or Oprah felt unless we ask them. And, we try to, but sometimes we don't get it, and we get to sort of express our own relationship to what happened to them rather than trying to kind of decipher how it felt for them.
And I think that's the fascinating thing when you bring up, like, the culture itself. It's like not just that person, but how it did shape the culture, like how we did go on these, like, kind of bandwagon rides in this and sometimes when you do that, the actual person gets lost in that. You only know the person's story in retrospect in certain ways. You just brought up women scorned, and I was just thinking about that in the terms of, like, positioning things like a woman scorned and stuff like that. And do we really, do we have the equivalent for that of a man at all? I mean, I don't really include the Me Too movement, because I think those are very specifically why.
Different. I mean, I think that's like
very different, right? But I was like, is there even an equivalent? Why are women always scorned in pop culture moments, and men, they're just men?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have this theory that's sort of emerged over these last few months of doing this show, which is that it all sort of goes back to the original sin, right? All of these stories, to some degree, are about women tempting men to go astray, or women not, like, being good enough or right. And that is all back to the original story, right? Like, Eve leads Adam astray. And in large part, that's the story of Amy Fisher. Amy Fisher led Joey Buttafuoco astray. That's the story we were told. And so I think we have this idea that women hold all the responsibility when something goes wrong, and we sort of hold women accountable in ways we don't hold men, right? So, when we look back on this moment with Oprah, it's often sort of looked back on as something she did to the culture rather than something that was happening to her by the culture. We give women onus, and with men, we're just forgiving. Boys will be boys. It's locker room talk. It's like,
they're
it's
idiots.
Okay. And I think, another story we do that I think is a really interesting episode is the Robin Givens, Mike Tyson interview with Barbara Walters.
That's not out yet, is it?
It's not out yet. It will be out in about a month.
Oh my goodness.
And that interview, this famous interview that Mike Tyson and Robin Givens did with Barbara Walters, where, Robin admits that he's being essentially physically abusive to her, is just fascinating, because instead of it being sympathetic for her, instead of the public responding to that by being like, oh my God, this poor woman is being literally physically beat up by the heavyweight champion of the world, the culture turns on Robin Givens, and she becomes known as literally the most hated woman in America. They put her on the cover of People magazine with the headline, "Why does everybody hate me?" There's like tons of articles, and there's a poll on CNN where everyone says they hate her. I mean, it's really sad when you look back on it.
On CNN.
But it's really this thing, again, where it's like, why is Robin responsible for Mike Tyson's behavior? Like the public attitude was that she had humiliated him. How dare she humiliate this man by telling the truth about what he was doing to her? And so we have this idea that women are responsible for men's behavior. It really is wild that persists so much.
Oh my gosh. I remember, because I remember I was young when that came out, but I used to watch any Barbara Walters special. I used to watch it. And I was thinking about that, just where we are now, is that now, I mean, like the press cycle, just even this week, you got Jada Pinkett Smith, her book's coming out. So you got all these quotes out there about Will Smith. And once again, I mean, I even am not admittedly right now a huge Jada Pinkett Smith fan, but it kind of goes to your point of, we are fully blaming this woman for this man's downfall. I mean, I'm even a little hazy on where I don't, but it is interesting. Back in the day, there was only a couple places to really get these. Like everybody was glued to their sets for these Barbara Walters specials or these special interviews on these 3 or 4 main networks, because we didn't have, like now, you know, Jada Pinkett Smith. And then today we wake up to Britney Spears book excerpts about Justin Timberlake. And we're like, okay, Jada, you can sit down for a second. It moves so quickly, where this did go on for a little bit with Robin Givens.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Jada Pinkett Smith thing is kind of funny because I in no way blame her for what Will Smith did. Like that was all about Will Smith and his ego. I think it's wild that anyone blamed her, but I also do feel like everything I'm learning about their relationship, I'm learning against my will. Like, I'm like, why is everyone telling me about this marriage? I have no interest in what's going on between these two. So, and I like both of them. I think they're both interesting people, but it feels like their marriage is a mess. And I would prefer that they work that out in therapy, not on, my social media timeline. But I think, look at the way we talked about Amber Heard even, right? Like wherever you fall on that, it is, again, this way in which we kind of villainize women and give men a pass. So we're like, look, maybe that relationship was a mess. And so we're much more forgiving of the man in that situation. And we're willing to kind of cut him slack. Certainly that's what you saw online. Like the online reaction was so pro Johnny Depp, and it was used as this way to kind of turn her into a joke, right? And wherever you fall on that particular story, it does just follow a pattern, right? And so that's also what's so interesting, is looking back and being like, you can draw a straight line from the way that Robin Givens was treated to the way Megan Thee Stallion was treated when she went through what she went through. Like you can really see the sort of patterns. And that is so interesting when you spend time with it.
That's what I love pop culture. That's why I love your show. That's why I think this stuff does need to be studied and can be studied, because as much as things change, they stay the same. Like it's on a bigger platform or multi-platforms. And I find that fascinating. Speaking of Amber Heard, I was and I'm not the biggest Elon Musk fan, but I read that autobiography that just came, or biography from Walter Isaacson. And there's a whole section where he's dating Amber Heard. And at this point, Elon's done a lot of bad stuff already, but there's this section about like, oh, she was horrible to him. She was just horrible. I'd never seen him like that. And all of a sudden I'm like, we're supposed to feel bad for Elon Musk.
I know. It's like, again,
Amber Heard is like being shit on again. I just thought it was funny.
I'm impressed you read that whole book. I mean, there's some part of me that feels like I should, but I also don't think I can spend that much time with Elon Musk.
I cheated. I listened to the audiobook on car rides from Arizona just as fast as that. So, and I do not like Elon Musk, but for some reason I was like, it's free at the library. Let's do this. And I'm glad I did, because it was very, in terms of artificial intelligence, I thought it was really scary and interesting what they're doing. But it was interesting, that Amber Heard section. I was just like laughing to myself. I'm like, this guy is wild. Like, we're supposed to feel bad for Elon.
Well, and also he did this really messed up thing to her. I don't know if you noticed this, but after the book came out, he, I guess, must have mentioned in the book or in some interview that she had dressed up as some video game
Overwatch character. Yeah, some video they both.
And then he released the picture, which was very clearly like a private picture she had taken for him of her in this like getup. And I was like, honestly, this is like a messed up thing to do, right? Like, this is essentially like a version of revenge porn. Like, why are you doing this? Like, even if you don't like Amber Heard, it's disgusting to reveal this picture just so you can impress your like ex fanboys, like stop
I
it.
mean, I sometimes don't get Elon. These billionaires, they want to be in pop culture. Like they're these billionaires, but then they want to be the guy that's making the memes and want to be doing the Twitter jokes. And I'll just never understand that.
If I had Elon Musk's money, I can promise you that I would just be like somewhere relaxing. Like I would be sleeping on a bed of it. That's it.
That's right. I always think about that with the Kardashians. Like, at a certain point, like just, hey, it might be too much. Just retire. Like, just, you know how much good TV is out there?
Honestly. I mean, I guess you become addicted to the attention, right? Like it must be that, because honestly, if I had endless amounts of money, I would just be hard chilling all the time. Like,
yes. I mean, but they must get in that space of like, if I can do this, I bet I can do this. And that must be intoxicating to some level, and it pulls them further away from reality. To kind of dip into reality a little bit, you had mentioned this earlier about the Amy Fisher, Joey Buttafuoco, and you're correct, is that, this is pre-reality shows for the most part. You'd had that PBS one and a couple of things, but
watch the PBS one, by the way. It's really interesting.
Yeah, An American Family, right?
Yeah.
Is that what it's
Isn't
called?
That fascinating?
Yeah. Yes. It really is. But the thing that I like, we were making reality shows. We just turned these people. Like I remember, as a kid, Joey Buttafuoco and Amy Fisher, like that even spilled over onto like Stern Show. They were like regulars on like Stern Show, where I didn't know, there was a TV movie based on this. There were three
TV movies.
Wasn't Drew Barrymore one of them?
Drew Barrymore was in one of them. That's a great example of like so bad it's good. I rewatched the movie in preparing for the episode, and she actually brings a lot of humor to the role, which I think it could just be this like very kind of creepy, salacious movie, but she's quite sort of funny and charming in the film, which must also be true of Amy Fisher. Like when you watch interviews with Amy, there is something about her that's charming, so it captures something real. And 3 movies. They were all released in the same week, and they each rated really, really well for the channels. So what it showed was it was actually one of the reasons they began to lean so much into these true crime stories. They saw how popular they were with the audiences, so they made more of these TV movies. Also, I want to be clear that when I say a TV movie, you probably think like a Lifetime movie, but they aired on ABC, NBC, and CBS. Like they were primetime movies.
Yes. I mean, really, we lived in a different culture. There was only a couple places to go, and TV movies. People forget about like these TV movies on ABC, CBS. They would made for NBC TV movies, and people it doesn't exist really anymore.
No, it's like it's gone the way of after school specials, which also had a very meaningful role in my life.
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, like the what is it? The More You Know campaign on NBC, One to Grow On, all of those things I romanticize so much because it really did shape my taste and what I grew up in Kansas. So all of that stuff everything was just so glamorous if it was on TV to me. But Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuoco, I was just thinking like, that is reality shows before reality. Like I could, what they kind of turned into would have been able to be on a Real Housewives of New Jersey, would have been completely able to be.
Yeah, she probably would have gotten a reality show if that happened now, right? She would have gotten one when she got out of prison. I think there actually was some attempt by the time she got out of prison for her and Joey to actually do a reality show together, but it was like too weird even for that time. And then actually the other thing that's interesting is I think Robin and Mike Tyson fall into this category too. Like they're sort of like every move they made during their marriage, which was really, it was less than a year, was followed so intensely by the tabloids and by television networks. And so you kind of did have this like window into their relationship, and it was all being done by the people around them who were leaking competing narratives, right? He had this group of people around him who really wanted her to, get out of the picture because she was insisting that they pay him more money, that they give him more of his own earnings. And so there were really all these background forces at play that you don't see when you're just consuming the content, right? You don't see that villainizing Robin Givens has like financial motives behind it, right? All you see is you're like, oh, that poor man and that like terrible ice queen. And, looking back, you really see how those stories are essentially being produced the same way reality shows are being produced.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, and even that still goes on to today. I mean, I was just thinking about that Justin Timberlake Britney stuff that's coming
Yeah.
out. Timberlake is trying to not make a comeback, but there's the NSYNC stuff. Who are they going to tour together? All of this stuff, and then this book comes out, and there was this a couple articles over the weekend of like Justin Timberlake is concerned for what's potentially in the Britney Spears. We started seeing these little articles pushed out, and I find that interesting about today's like pop culture is this delicate balance of winning social media and winning news coverage and trying to get ahead of something. And you've got to be really savvy as a pop culture lover now, because these stories get pushed out that try to direct you in how to feel.
Well, and by the way, Justin Timberlake has always been great at that. So that's kind of one of the things Justin Timberlake has done well in his career and is just now getting called out for, which is when the Janet Jackson thing happened, he made sure that the prevailing narrative was that he was innocent and she was to blame. And that very much took hold. And he's had to apologize for that since. But also, when he broke up with Britney, he made a whole video, a music video, with like a lookalike, and essentially made like the world believe that she had cheated on him, which, I don't
Susie,
know.
I believe that. I heard,
I
heard it was like, oh, cheated with the dancer guy. Like, I remembered that saying, wow, she broke his heart. That was the narrative that I believed.
So he's done a very good job over the years of like manipulating the stories that gets told about the other people in these narratives with him. And I think it's probably come as a bit of a shock that he doesn't have that same control. It's getting harder to control the message in the way that it used to be, because now people have a direct line. Like Britney Spears can say what she wants to herself on her own Instagram. And Janet Jackson can make a film about her own experience. There just didn't used to be, as you said earlier, so many outlets. Like you could go to Barbara Walters or you could go to Oprah. Maybe there were like a couple other places you could go, but that was it. So you only got to tell your story once, and you had to hope that you achieved whatever it was you were trying to achieve in telling that story.
Or, I mean, remember when People magazine covers was the end all be all,
Yes. And also tabloid covers had a lot more power then, like when you think about what it used to mean to be on the cover of an Us Weekly, like that's really different now. And also, I think the other thing we talk a lot about is that there were these tabloid television shows that had a lot of power. Like I guess they still kind of exist, like Entertainment Tonight, whatever.
Like
but
Inside Edition, all of those shows
It's not the same. I mean, those shows, I don't know if you remember, but like Hard Copy, those shows really set an agenda in terms of the way a lot of celebrities were talked about. So they had a lot of power and they paid for a lot of stories. So, in the Amy Fisher story, there are a lot of men come forward with stories about her that, may or may not be true, but, because they're getting paid, they're willing to tell,
It's wild. I wanted to touch on your love of reality shows. Obviously, we love reality shows here. And I geeked out when I saw you guys as the bartenders on Watch What Happens Live.
Oh my God, yes.
What was that experience like? That was amazing.
It was so fun. It was exactly as fun as you think it would be to be there. I had been as a guest in the show before. Like I had seen a taping of the show before. So I had like a little bit of a sense of what it was like. But it was really fun. And we were on with Uba and Matt Rogers, who were both absolutely lovely.
Matt Rogers nailed that Sandoval monologue at the end.
Oh my God. So good. He's so good. And he actually did the nicest thing for me afterwards. My niece is a huge fan and she's living abroad, and he like did this like video for her, like a personal cameo. It was so sweet. He's such a nice guy. And Uba was so sweet too. And also just absolutely stunning. I mean, you can tell she's stunning on television,
she really
but my God,
stunning.
in person, you're like, she's just like swoon worthy. She's so pretty and like sweet. And it was just great. That show is a machine. Like they know what they're doing. They've been doing it a long time. So they kind of just like get you in and out really fast. And it almost is over before you have time to process that it's happened, So it took me a couple days afterwards to feel like it was real. I can't believe I was on this show.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be a guest at Watch What Happens Live a couple weeks ago of like watching it, but you're right. And it was during the day. It was like at like 12:30 in the afternoon. It wasn't like, and I will say, I used to be like a Letterman guy. I watched all of these things, but I watch What Happens Live every night. It's one of those really like fun shows for me that I get a couple laughs. I always find out a little something of like, I love Andy in terms of pop culture.
Yeah. I just like that show is nice also because it really is a break from everything. Like when the world feels like it's exploding, you can watch What Happens Live, and for 30 minutes, everything feels like it's okay. The conflicts are minor. Like
Andy's a solid host. Like, I was just like,
I think he's
good
really
hands.
there to have fun. And so it feels more fun in general. Yeah, it was really fun. And then I guess, although I said that about how people seem like they're there to have fun, but did you watch the recent one with Mary Cosby and Z-Way? It's so uncomfortable.
Me, it was so, and by the way, I think
Fun. I don't know. Z-Way even seems uncomfortable. It's so crazy.
and it wasn't like, I thought, oh, this will be uncomfortable fun, but it was like a second, but then it was like, that was fun, and now the whole rest of the episode is really uncomfortable.
Yeah, like the whole time I was like pumped for it. I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be great. And people online were freaking out about it. But then it started and you were like, oh no, Mary is so weird. Like just so deeply weird.
Yeah, what did we expect?
Yeah, like she's not there to kind of poke fun at the thing because she really thinks, I think she might actually think she's a god in some way. I don't know. It's very confusing.
And then Z-Way, like with the looks and stuff, like she wasn't really able to like make the inroads because I would imagine like that's a really tough job for her too, to like have to try to even, where do I go with Mary Cosby after I give her the fish sandwich? And that doesn't land. Where do I go?
Yeah, Mary's like, no, thank you. I don't want that garbage. You're like, it's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's like, it was interesting because Z-Way usually gets to be the weird one. So she was really struggling with being the like straight person in that. Like,
yes.
Like she's like, I don't know how to play this straight man. I'm supposed to be the wild one here. And I think even Andy was like, I don't know what to do with this. My favorite was when he was like, why did you come back on the show? And she was like, to do you guys a favor.
Yeah, you guys needed me. And I was like,
trying to be shady. She just genuinely believes that she's like a gift she's giving them.
I say this to the audience is that sometimes Bravo works best when it does feel like a fever dream. Like Salt Lake City this season to me feels like a fever dream where I think it's so good, but like you try to even chart some kind of course of like character development and motivation. And every time I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if Meredith's spreading these rumors. I don't even, they're going snowshoeing.
Season. I agree with you. It's so interesting. Like it's compelling, but it is also so weird. Every episode something happens where you're like, what? Like there's like the Mary going to get the fish fillet, which you're like, how is she just like allowed? Like why aren't producers making her do anything?
No, it seems like they let her do. It seems like they're under marching orders to not question Mary at all. Whatever she wants, just do. Even the characters, like the other characters, are like, that's just Mary. And then Meredith is the only one that seems like, oh, Mary, it's so true what you said. Like she acts like she's like that. Mary's like, oh, it's so great to have you. You make so much sense. Like I'm like, what Meredith? What?
Very confusing. But also, Meredith is having a great season in a really weird way. Like I just love that she's like leaning into this kind of like what is the persona she's taken on? It's like you're like slightly pill popping auntie. Like she's like, Charity, come take her away. It's like, it's like I don't actually think she's. It's like there's the slurring, and I like love this version of Meredith. I find it really amusing. And then Heather, I think she was such a fan favorite, and then got such like a like a pushback on that. Right? She really didn't have a great season, so I think she's also kind of come unhinged. So it does feel like a fever dream. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and by the way, it's the only franchise to me that feels that way, and I like it. I like the different franchises make me feel like New York is like really kind of not subtle, but it's slower. The pacing's different. We're getting to know these women, but Salt Lake is like just a weird another level. And then this next month we got Beverly Hills, Potomac, Miami, and Married to Medicine coming. Where do your tastes lie in your Bravo reality shows? Do you watch all of them?
I don't watch all of them. I'm really like a Real Housewives Vanderpump Rules girl. So I really watch all the Real Housewives. I've watched most of them from the beginning. Potomac I came a little late to. And I haven't watched the new Miami, although everyone tells me it's amazing. I
good.
Watched it like a million years ago and then was like, I don't know how many new shows I can take on. But I've never really branched out into the Married to Medicine or like the Summer House. I don't really do any of those. And also I don't do any of the like boat ones, which I've heard are amazing. I mean, I believe that all of these are great, but I also just like have time to do my job.
Yeah.
Anyone consumes as much Bravo seems people consume. And so,
Susie, I don't have a life. Like, I don't have a life anymore. Like, there's too many shows there, and I wish at least like we would like teachers, they would give us the summers off. Like, just no Bravo on the summers, and like go introduce yourself to your family again. You know?
yeah, it's true. Although I am kind of what I love about Bravo is there's always something. Like when everything else, there's like nothing on TV. You know, there's going to be some Bravo show that season. How are you feeling about the new New York? I'm so curious how people feel about it because I feel like it was very popular in the beginning, and now it's getting a bit more of like a mixed reaction.
So I'm middle of the road. Like, so I'm a big believer in we need new women's stories. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like you've got to, I love staying with certain ladies and, getting those storylines out. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't think there are tons of women out there right now that are actual friends with each other that we want to hear their stories. And you have to invest in that. It can't be like one season, it didn't work, cancel it. You got to stay with them. You got to be able to set a foundation. So for me, the New York was a really breath of fresh air. I was kind of enjoying getting to know these ladies. I think it got a little long in the tooth towards the end. I would have probably made like a 10 episode season and not a 13 to 14. But I got to say, like, I thought some elements were being set up that I would be interested to see how they pay off. I just love seeing new things. I love Bravo. It's like that old, your hometown team where I'm like, yeah, man, let's do BravoCon. Let's do I get proud. I'm like, yeah, do Winter Summer Southern Charm House. Let's do it,
I mean, I really like it. I have to say, because it feels as a New Yorker more like real New York. Like, I just couldn't relate to Ramona.
The Upper East Side. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's not even the Upper East Side of it. It'd be fine to have like a woman from the Upper East Side. It's just that it made it seem like the Upper East Side was New York, so that never like felt very relatable to me. But also I think it's just like kind of interesting to have a different energy. It feels very different from the other shows in a lot of ways because it just feels more modern, right? They're like actually influencers in some cases. Like they have the kind of jobs, these women have on the other shows, but they kind of pretend not to have. Also, I think the thing that I love about this kind of era of Bravo is there's a lot more breaking of the fourth wall, which I'm really into. Like, I feel like that was amazing on OC this year, right? Like seeing Shannon try and control the narrative.
Yeah.
And then
I have fights that emotionally terrorize me. Get this mic off my body.
Just like, I love that we got to see that. And then we got to see that to some degree in New York. And I think we're getting it a little bit with Mary, even in Salt Lake. And I think what's so interesting is they're all being a lot more public about how there are things they tell each other off camera and things they tell each other on camera. And it's a betrayal when you sort of cross that line. Because we've always known that as viewers, like we're not dumb, but now they're being much more explicit about it, right? Like Shannon's like, this is the vault. You're not allowed to talk about X. And then like Sai is mad. And it's interesting because in that last episode, Uba is not mad.
I didn't say it on camera.
Yeah. So it's like interesting because it's now becoming more explicit that we are like, there's strategy in these shows. Because, my thing about Real Housewives is I think it's a woman's workplace. That's what I think it is.
But it is. I mean, in a sense, and what I love about what you just said is that not even really the jobs that they actually have in life, but they consider like showing up to film a work. This is my workplace in front of the camera.
Yeah.
So I totally say this on the show all the time, that it's turned into Survivor Housewives.
Yeah.
The element of gameplay now, it's gameplay. Even on Salt Lake, you're like, is Meredith saying these rumors behind everybody's back to try to get a leg up? Or is Whitney coming in here and trying to I didn't say that rumor. I didn't say that.
Do you not feel like Whitney is definitely like got her hands on the pulse in the background? She feels like she's pulling a lot of strings in the background.
Because if you study Housewives, Whitney and Heather were deep fans of all of these shows before they got on these shows, so they know how they work. But I think it's interesting from where Housewives started, where it would almost be like a documentary, to where it is now, where it's like all gameplay, people like Shannon. And I love those fights. It's so silly to me of like what they say off camera, what they say on camera. Yeah. How would you ever trust Tamara with any personal information? Is the fact that they even ever and she must be so good at it that they just spill all the time and she just collects information.
Oh my God.
It fascinating to me. And that's what I love. And you're right about the bravo, effing bravo moments. I think as an audience, we are savvier than we've ever been. Yeah. We're adult enough to realize this is being filmed. Like, let us know. Let us in on this. We can handle it. Like, it doesn't upset me that this is a TV show. Like, I love that it's being filmed.
People love it, right? Because it feels like you're being given access to something that was being kept from you. It's like a little behind the scenes. Like, you're getting this like inside track, because we all speculate about this stuff, but now at least we're getting to actually see it play out between them, and it makes sense because it's a lot of the drama between them is about the show. So if they don't acknowledge it, then there's we don't understand why everyone's so mad at each other. Okay, but I have one other thing I want to say about this, which is do you feel like it's wild on Salt Lake how everyone acts like Lisa didn't just call Meredith the whore on camera? I feel like it's the craziest. Am I the only one who cannot get past this? If someone said the things about me that Lisa Barlow said about Meredith, I would be.
She talked half of New York City. I can't believe it. Her and her fake kids and fake lifestyle. I mean, really, and it's that thing. That's another bizarre fever dream part of this. That is something you don't come back from. And then all of a sudden this season, they're buddy again. And we don't even, we mention it lightly, but that's it. I don't know how these women sometimes get from point A to point B. Cause I'm like, wait a sec, you swore last season that it would never be the same because of that. And they kept showing those words. And each time I'd be like, ooh, that still hurts. Ow.
Also, how did Meredith lose that? I feel like she lost the narrative on that completely. She came back and last season they were all like, Meredith, just get over it. Okay, Lisa said you're a complete whore. Move on.
They eternal sunshined her. They erased those memories from Meredith's head.
I know. And then this season, in the last episode, Lisa was like, I know how, Angie is feeling because I also had my reputation be smart. And I'm like, you have this reputation. What is it?
But also, that's the other, whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to the jazz tickets? Did we ever get any kind of closure on, those things just got dropped, and I'm like, well, those were big things, and, you're now bringing it up.
That was just honestly, that was, one of my favorite Housewives rumors ever, because it was so out there. It was so insane. I was like, come on. If she's doing sexual favors, don't we think she's getting more than jazz tickets? That feels like a very low bar.
And Whitney was like, Meredith definitely told me you did. You told me, Heather. You told me that you did. It was so. That's what Salt Lake is, the most bizarre, most watchable this season show, and it really excites me. I think tonight we get a new episode, which is so exciting. What else are you watching in terms of even reality? What do you unwind with? What do you in terms of pop culture? Are you any streaming scripted shows?
Yeah, I am. I do. We just actually watched Severance, my boyfriend and I, which we hadn't watched. Everyone.
Oh,
and we absolutely love
so
it.
Good.
I can't wait for that to come back. I'm watching. This is not fiction, but I just am in the middle of watching Beckham, which I think. Have you watched that yet? So interesting, right?
Yeah, Susie. I don't even like sports, and I got super into it.
Same. I didn't know. I knew he was a huge star, but I don't think I realized just how big a star he was.
Yeah.
And so that's been really interesting. And I think seeing.
Wait, and Susie, and to your point about what you were talking about earlier, Victoria Beckham, how they really shaded her. They blamed her.
Always the woman's fault. Always. It's yes, I thought that was really fascinating. That was actually the point of the documentary I was in last night, where she's getting blamed for his Madrid performance. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that he can handle himself on a soccer field without her being blamed for the results. But yeah, I think that's been really interesting. My niece convinced me a few seasons ago to start watching The Bachelor and Bachelorette universe again. So I've been doing a little bit of that.
Wait, are you doing Golden Bachelor?
I haven't been able to get into Golden Bachelor. It's is it good? I don't know. It feels too depressing.
Susie, Susie, it is horribly depressing. I cry at least once an episode, but it's only an hour and not 2 hours. And I will say, this is what I love.
To watch The Bachelor. I'm like, why am I still watching? It's been 4 hours.
Yeah, I've not enjoyed an hour and 30 minutes of this. Why am I doing this? But Golden Bachelor is great because I trust these people that have loved and then lost. I'm more willing to see. To me, that's the hook, that it's fascinating. And this guy, Gary, seems like just a genuinely good guy with a meek voice, and he seems so nice. Yeah, you have to have people that you still believe in.
I will give it another chance. I had to watch the first episode, but I was just I don't want to see these grown women bicker. I just couldn't figure out where it was going to go, because I don't. It's already awkward enough when the Bachelorettes are at each other's throats. I'm I don't really want to see grandmothers. I'm not sure about that, but I have been watching Bachelor in Paradise, and I have to say it is delivering as it always does. Do you watch the Paradise?
Okay, no, I have it on my DVR, but I went Golden Bachelor instead. And then once I did Golden Bachelor, I was like, I can't do 3 hours of Bachelor when there are other things on.
Great. Least like a version online that's just the important parts because I cannot watch so much Bachelor.
Yeah, it's too much Bachelor, and then I was like, is this ageism that they let this Bachelor in Paradise be 2 hours and Golden's like only one? Like that's ageism. Like give them 2 hours.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot of ageism on The Bachelor in general. Don't you like notice how whenever there's like a 30-year-old in the group, they're like, can you believe this old lady is here trying to win this Bachelor's heart? Like they treat the 30-year-olds like they're literally 85.
Yeah.
No, there's some ageism in that universe. But yeah.
I love aging out of the Bachelor universe is a sad moment. Yeah.
You know what I was thinking about the other day is, aren't you surprised there's never been a Bachelor Con? Like, it feels like it's so obvious as a next step. Like in a lot of ways, I feel like the Bachelor, like, you know, what is it? Like the Bachelor universe developed
Bachelor Nation.
Yeah. Developed this idea of turning them all into ongoing characters and then giving people access to them even before Bravo really embraced that. And now Bravo has far exceeded that by like with BravoCon and all these things it's doing. But Bachelor Nation needs a Bachelor Con. Like people would show up.
I mean, Bachelor Nation will one day be a sovereign nation. They will split off from the union. And because also, and I think it's felt like 90 Day Fiance was one of the first kind of like big, like 90 Day Fiance started doing these shared universe shows where it was like putting all of these different iterations. And Bravo, because Andy thought it was like déclassé, they didn't do those shared universe shows like Ultimate Girls Trip yet. And then 90 Day Fiance approved that it could work. And then people like The Bachelor and Bravo finally copped on board. But I think you're right. That's destined for a convention or a bachelor cruise, like a celebrity bachelor cruise.
Oh, 100%. Ryan, I feel like you and I should right now pitch ourselves to do a panel for Bachelor Con.
Could you? Oh my God, please. Are you going to?
We will make that an amazing day.
Yeah, if you're listening, ABC. Wait, do you have a couple more minutes? I just want to bring up Vanderpump real quick.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Vanderpump Rules really quick. Where do you stand now that we are months and months out of Scandival, even though Tom Sandoval now is on Special Forces on Fox, getting beat up every week and trying to win us back, even though he's trying to say he's bringing, grace to his name again. Where are you now months and months after Scandival broke? Have you changed your opinion at all?
I don't think so, to be honest. I mean, I think Scandival is a villain. Like, I think he's like a narcissist and maybe slightly unhinged, right? And I'm staying with that theory about him. I mean, sure, I feel a little bad for him that it went so crazy, but on the other hand, he knew what he was doing. Like, I feel like this whole pretense that he's like, trying to pretend like it just happened, like he was clearly kind of trying to engineer a storyline. If anyone engineered that storyline, it was Tom Sandoval. It just spun wildly out of his control.
I think he didn't. He expected to speak. He didn't expect her to find out when she did. Like he expected him to get through the reunion, I bet, break up over the season, and then next season be able to like come off as a hero in a sense. And I just think it got all kind of completely messed up because Tom's a goof.
Well, and also I think he has said since that he was planning on going to Winter House. So he clearly was planning on breaking up with her anyway, right? I think what he didn't expect also was that the fans would be so in her favor because he was trying to paint her as this like shrew nag, like who never replaces the batteries. I mean, it was also just
pins and batteries. You need to have, if you're a woman, pins and batteries.
Yeah, I was very confused by that. I guess my opinion of Rachel has changed a little bit. Not to say that I like her more, because I do think she's like sort of weirdly vacant. And I don't think the interview with Bethany really changed my opinion on that. Like she didn't come off as super smart. It's a terrible thing to say.
And by the way, and also I blame that partly on Bethany as well.
Yeah, I felt like that was really a lot more about Bethany than it was about Rachel. But I also just think, Rachel isn't great at communicating. She's not particularly articulate when she's trying to express herself. And, what happens as a result is I think she gets these sort of like canned lines from people. And then she sort of stumbles when she's repeating them. So you never really can figure out what she's feeling. I think I kind of was hoping she'd come back this season because I am just like curious what Rachel is actually thinking. I feel like we never actually know anything about what's going on in Rachel's head. It just feels like all I can picture up there is just like balloons, Like I don't understand why we're not.
No, I I totally understand that, but at the same time, I respect that she didn't come back. And I think it would have been a disappointment just like her at the reunion because, and this is not a sin, she's not an effective communicator and it's not like she would have changed. She doesn't know like really talking head. She doesn't know how to get into it effectively. She's not like a Lala. And that's great. Everybody doesn't have to be that way, but we would have been disappointed because she would have never been able to, I think, truly effectively communicate. We saw it on the Bethany Frankel podcast. We saw all of that. So I think the correct decision for her and her mental health is that. But what's funnier for me, if we do the Bravo, Bravo, effing Bravo, is to see all these Vanderpumpers try to get like the brand deals and like all of a sudden this sudden fame again. It's got to be insane.
You know, they were like on the brink of irrelevance, and good for them that they've like been able to embrace this moment. And I am actually really curious to see how this new season's going to go because, you know, it's hard to imagine what could possibly live up to what we've been through together. You know, like I feel like nothing will ever.
I say it's like Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet. You're not going to see this kind of thing. It's like a comet that you only see every 75 years. We'll never see this again. But like, wow, we got to have this cultural moment together, and that's exciting. What's also exciting is In Retrospect, the new podcast. And what do we do for new podcasts that we love? We immediately go subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And then without even thinking, just based on my word, you rate that 5 stars. You rate that 5 stars. She spent an hour with us today, a very busy person, a very important busy person, spent an hour with us today talking about the stuff we love. But this podcast with her and Jessica Bennett, I think is going to be something that you insanely love. I cannot wait for the new episodes. One a week, right, Susie?
Yes, every Friday.
Okay. Well, go support this. I'm going to be supporting this, and I hope you will too. Susie, I hope you come back sometime. This was just fabulous.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
I'll see you at BachelorCon.
Oh, yeah. Can't wait.